Part 2. So, we cut back to France, in which Jurati is still in the Picard house. She's now sleeping next to the fire because there is no heating on the ship itself, which is cloaked, but it's very badly cloaked that it keeps flickering all the time. I guess to remind us that it's there, that the ship is right next to that house, and Jurati is sleeping by the fire in the house, and meanwhile the bored queen is alone on the ship without anyone or anything monitoring her. Why not set the ship's computer to keep an eye on the bored queen to make sure she doesn't do anything? So no, they just left the bored queen on her own on the ship, and then she's using her voice imitator to give commands to the computer to hook her up to the phone network of France. And then she speaks in French and calls the police to the Picard house. Why is she doing that? Because she's bored. And even though she's the one who helped them go into the past for this mission, because it's in her interest as well to save the future, because the Borg were destroyed in the future they came from, so she also wants to change the future. But now she's so bored that she's willing to sacrifice all of that, and so she exploits the opportunity of being left all alone on the ship without any observation, without anyone making sure she doesn't cause anything. It's only the Borg queen, the one who almost conquered the whole galaxy with her Borg army. It's not a big deal to leave her unobserved alone without anyone watching her on the ship, without limiting her computer access, without putting a force field around her, nothing like that. She just hangs around in the ship, literally, and using the ship's computer to make a phone call to the police, to call for police to arrive in the Picard vineyard. And that's how she tells it to the police. And so everyone knows what the Picard vineyard is, apparently. They immediately know where to go to. Even though this place was stated to have been abandoned for 100 years, and yet somehow the house is still so well equipped. It still has a bunch of unopened wine bottles, and it even has a rifle which Jurati later takes, and it has bullets and everything is working. So this abandoned house, which was abandoned ever since the Second World War, is still so well equipped. No one ever came to steal anything from it, no homeless people settled in it. And then one cop shows up, goes into the house, but Jurati is sleeping, so she doesn't notice it. Then he gets outside and he sees the cloaked ship. Let me repeat that. He sees the cloaked ship and manages to go inside of it. Because, just as we saw in Star Trek Discovery, cloaking devices are now so terrible that you can still see everything even if it's cloaked. You can still see the shape of it, and so Picard's ship is all glimmering in the darkness, and is so well lit that the cop manages to get inside of it. And by the way, it's kind of funny how it's still nighttime in France, even though with the amount of crazy stuff they were doing in LA in the last several episodes, it's still the same day apparently. So it's still sunlight in LA and it's still dark in France, even though so much stuff has happened in the last few episodes. But apparently it was all in the few short hours and it's still nighttime in France. And even though it's nighttime and the ship is cloaked, the cop is still able to see the cloaked ship because cloaking devices are so bad now, and he's able to even get inside of the ship. So they didn't even lock the door on their spaceship, which they brought from the future into the past, and they landed it and they cloaked it with a bad cloak which is still visible, and they didn't even lock the door of it. And the cop from this century is able to get into it, and then he approaches the unguarded bored queen, which was left without any precautions, even though she was the leader of one of the most dangerous, technologically advanced species in the whole galaxy, which almost conquered the whole galaxy, but they left her unguarded on this badly cloaked, wide open ship without any locked door. And then this cop approaches her, and then he sees her, and she gets so scared that he just drops to the floor, and then she pulls out a huge giant tentacle, I don't know from where, and captures this cop. So now she has these huge, seemingly organic tentacles coming out of her, which apparently have more mass than what she would have inside of her. So where did that tentacle even come from? How come they didn't know she has these tentacles? Why didn't she use them previously to attack anyone on the ship? Why didn't they put her in a force field to prevent exactly this kind of stuff from happening? And so she holds this cop hostage, but she doesn't assimilate him or anything. Instead, she calls to Jurati to come to her. And then Jurati takes that fully functional rifle, which was there for a century, and then she comes with the rifle to confront the bored queen. And the bored queen says that she can easily assimilate this cop, but she doesn't want to. She wants to assimilate Jurati. And I keep thinking, why not assimilate both of them? You have the cop already, so why not assimilate him? And then use him to assimilate Jurati too, and then go on to assimilate the entire planet, like you would be able to do if you still have any nanites left, which obviously you do, since she can later assimilate Jurati. And why didn't she assimilate her earlier? when she was alone with her and she has this giant organic tentacle popping out of her back somehow. So she tells Jurati she will leave the cop alone if Jurati comes to her willingly. I guess maybe she needs Jurati to willingly accept her to be able to assimilate her. I guess that's the only explanation. And then Jurati just shoots the Borg Queen and kills her. And then later she says all it took was one bullet to the queen's organic parts and that killed her. And I kind of facepalmed at that as well, because I seem to remember when we first saw the queen in First Contact, it wasn't that easy to kill her. I remember her entire flesh got melted off by warp core plasma, and even after that she was still alive because her brain was kind of cybernetic, it was all mechanical, and it was still moving around, and Picard had to snap its robotic spine for it to really die. And yet here the queen dies from one shot of an ancient rifle, and one bullet from it was enough to kill the Borg Queen. And then Jurati heals that cop somehow and repairs all of his internal organs except his spleen, which she takes out for some reason, and then she erases his memory and puts him back in the car. And so I guess there's no problem with the timeline, because from that cop's point of view, he just came to the Picard vineyard and saw nothing and left, I guess. So, and I guess she also cleaned all his clothes really well and she erased his memory, and that's why he will never know that he almost got killed by an evil Borg Queen from the future. And so the timeline is not in danger from this event somehow, even though he got pulled off from his usual duties. And so maybe he should have been doing something else at this time period, saving someone, which he didn't save in this new timeline. So I would still say it's very likely he did mess up the timeline. And then later in the episode we find out that after she shot the Borg Queen, she actually approached her and allowed the Borg Queen to assimilate her, because I guess she still has some nanites left, and so why didn't she assimilate that cop? So anyway, nothing makes any sense. So anyway, Jurati will probably become that Borg Queen that we saw in the start of the season, the one that was in the mask. Will probably be revealed to be Jurati later on, because now she sees the Borg Queen as her imaginary friend. Now the Borg Queen is talking with her in her own mind, and so Jurati will probably become another version of the Borg Queen later on, maybe after Picard will tell her all about his childhood trauma, or when his mother used to tell him to look up whenever he heard his father beating up his mother, and so he'll probably tell that story to Jurati later on, which is how she knew what to say to him when she met him as the new Borg Queen in the first episode. She told him to look up, instead of simply revealing her face and showing herself to be Jurati, which might have stopped people from blowing up that ship, which started the whole thing in the first episode. But anyway, none of this will make any sense in the end, no matter what convoluted BS they will try to explain it with. To be continued.